Okay, they want us to test the mic, so you can just speak into it.
Derek, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
They will
Is
let
it
us know
working?
when it's enough.
Is it enough? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so this is we're doing this as we promote a show called Greedypendence. I think you read it in the email.
Yes.
So yes, that's what we're doing this in relation to.
Okay. All right.
It's not like a weekly thing, but there is a series online.
Okay.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking this is a very nice setting. I think it's something that STI would be interested in, even just attending as part of the audience. To be great. Okay.
Can you hear us? Hello, hello. Can you hear us?
With the mic? Okay.
Okay.
So with the mic.
So we need to speak up.
Yes. Okay. All right.
Okay.
So we have one last lecture, and then we are good to go. Just want to let you guys know we are filming. It might be got to the picture, but we're taking care of it. So we all stand by.
Doris. Do I need to introduce myself? Wait. Okay. Just occurred to me, that's the only thing. I'm not in events, but we can ask these guys.
Okay, so we have problem with this one, a little bit fixed as we go.
Okay,
Problem is new, so can't just
the small one.
this one.
So I look at this one. Okay.
Look at this one.
This
So we are going, this is countdown. Yeah? So Rosie, go ahead and introduce us.
Okay.
Okay. So we are good. We're good with 5, 4, 3, 2, and 9,
Hi everyone, my name is Rose Lucalo. I'm an editor here at Baraza Media Lab on a project called Fumbua Kenya. Fumbua is about addressing misinformation online and everywhere actually. But we're here today to discuss a subject that really vexes a lot of Kenya, makes a lot of us apathetic, the issue of corruption. Corruption is something that you would think we can easily get rid of. Jail the people who are stealing, close the loopholes that they're using, but that's not been the experience we've had. Since independence 60 years ago, Kenya has battled this thing. It doesn't matter which regime comes in, which government comes in, we hear scandal after scandal after scandal, and all of them promise that they're going to tame corruption. What we see actually is that it grows bigger and bigger. The former president, immediate former president, Uhuru Kenyatta, said that at the moment it's reached a level of 2 billion shillings per day being stolen from government. That's $16 to $17 million. I was trying to find something that I can really just compare it to. And I looked at the building of the Kakamega Referral Hospital, which is estimated to cost 8 billion shillings. It means we could build a big referral hospital every single week if we tamed corruption. So it's like a huge, huge scandal. We've created so many institutions to address corruption. We have the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. We have the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Courts. We've strengthened the budget control. We've strengthened the Auditor General. We've put in place rules for civil servants not to dabble in business. Nothing seems to work. All that we see is better, more accurate reports of how badly we are doing. So part of the reason that we're getting together today is really just to look at this thing and see why is it that we cannot get a grip on corruption. There's also the knock-on effect. When we think about corruption, very often we're looking at the grand corruption, but we're feeling it more and more in our pockets. It's being loaded onto all our bills, onto our taxes, and it's really affecting our reputation as a destination for doing business. The richest man in Africa, Aliko Dangote, said that he refuses to invest in Kenya because of the mega corruption. And he's a Nigerian. Nigeria has huge corruption problems. The president of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, said we have to kill corruption before it kills us. It is such a threat to the Nigerian economy. But here is a Nigerian telling us that Kenya may actually be worse. But we don't just want to look at the economic cost. We want to look at the cost to human life and to the socio-economic fabric of our country. We're doing this actually against the backdrop of a newly released research. Baraza Media partnered with Odipodev and Africa Uncensored to produce a new research. You can find it in 2 products. One is on the Africa Uncensored website, which is just curated research on the history of corruption in Kenya. The second one is a podcast where we're trying to humanize the face of corruption and to make it alive. And if you go to the Nation Audio site, you can find it a podcast called Greedypendence. The first episode was on the hero, should be the hero, the whistleblower of Goldenberg, Munyekei. Very often we don't recognize these people. To get to grips to this, we have today with us Derek Makandia from Transparency International. Transparency International has been working on corruption and documenting it for over 20 years in Kenya. So welcome, Derek.
Thank you very much.
And without wasting very much time, why is it that some countries can get to grips with corruption? They can keep it under control, but countries like ours, it just runs away with us.
Corruption is very hard to diagnose because every time you try, you find so many layers and aspects of it. There is a very different diagnosis for petty corruption, which is very different from grand corruption. And also now there is new corruption, which is state capture. So I think one of the biggest reasons why we are not able to handle it is because of our ethos. It is largely because we as Kenyans allow it to thrive in many ways. Just look at the crop of leadership that we have. We have a parliament which is full of individuals who have been implicated in corruption cases or adversely mentioned, or some have even been convicted or are facing active criminal charges in court. But the moment we allowed our leadership, the composition of our leadership to be tainted and such individuals to occupy those places, then we basically gave corruption a go-ahead. So I think that is one of the biggest reasons why we have not been able to tame it, is because the people who are supposed to tame it are also benefiting from it. In a very small, simple terms, I think that is one of the biggest causes.
You're painting a really hopeless picture. The picture you're painting is of a country that's been captured by the people who are making the rules and also profiting from corruption. And then we expect them also to sort out the problem and pass the rules and enforce the rules, the laws. Is it really possible? Is there a way out, really?
Well, for many years, as Transparency International and so many organizations working on good governance have focused on strengthening the systems and the institutions so that we are able to prevent corruption. But our systems are only as strong as the people managing them. So I think we have come to the realization that maybe we need to change the people so that whenever the people go to select or elect their leaders, they vote for people who will be straightforward whether or not the systems are good enough. So I think it's not necessarily helplessness or hopelessness, but it's more of a realization that we may need to go back to the people and have a conversation with the people on the need, just the impact of corruption and the need to get the right people into office. If you remember when President Kibaki was voted in, one of his strongest messages was to curb corruption. And you remember there was a period where there was a lot of incidents and a lot of stories and even videos where people in matatus would arrest a police officer asking for bribes. And there was a purge at that moment, and there was that overwhelming desire by people to espouse the values of transparency and integrity. So at that point, we had a very huge dip in terms of even the scandals, the earlier years of Kibaki. And we were very hopeful at that time. And I think one of the best moments of our nation was when we as a people changed how we thought and not strengthened our systems. So I think we just need to go back to the people, and then the systems will, in one way or the other, fix themselves.
I just want to test you on that, because I think when we talk about going back to the people, are people even aware that we are still paying for some of these grand corruption? Do they know that it is built into the taxes which we pay? When you buy anything, even a matchbox, and you pay the tax on it, an element of it is going to pay for corruption that dates back 30 years. You know, it's built into the budgets. Yeah. You know, and the loans that we take, and we keep taking new loans to cover new corruption, and now we're asking people to understand. Do they understand that we are paying? Do they understand that Kenya is expensive because we are paying for corruption, and in many other ways as well?
I think a significant number of people understand, or maybe no. Maybe they understand, but do they really comprehend it? Does it stick around longer than when you have that conversation? I don't intend to to make a more hopeless point, but in the words of, I think it was Churchill, or either Churchill or Mark Twain, he said the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with an ordinary citizen. So every time we go to engage citizens, there's a sense of hope that you get when you put them in a place and talk about issues of corruption, and people actually know these things, and they understand that it affects them. But then when we get to the elections, I don't know what happens, and the decisions that they make are very different from what you feel they know. So I think it's I would say it's a gray area. Yeah. It's an area we've not really understood. Yeah. Maybe it's a message we've not packaged well enough. But in terms of having the knowledge on the impact of corruption, they will do. They do. Citizens do. In terms of understanding so-and-so is corrupt, they know. Yeah. But anytime there is any action that is required for them to take against these individuals, something happens. Perhaps it's the economy. Perhaps it's the fact that somewhat corrupt individuals are more philanthropic. So in some way, citizens will feel like they benefit more from individuals who do not espouse those principles than those of us who just go and preach the gospel and live them that way. So we really need to change how, maybe how we deliver our message. Maybe we need to package it differently, but in terms of knowledge, I think that is there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's affecting the whole reputation of Kenya,
Yeah.
you know, as a destination for business. And we say we want to grow our economy, and then we don't do anything to address the circumstances. And I think it doesn't affect, very often we talk about investment in terms of foreign investment, but even local people are afraid to invest because you don't know, will you get your money back? Should you just do a quick deal? And you get the culture of my deals, you know, and you know, the tenderpreneurs just get your money quickly and go. Nobody is investing for the long term. I want to switch a little bit, and then let's look a little bit, because institutions like your own, through the years, the whole 60 years of independence, institutions such as yours have been victimized, vilified, harassed, even people associated with Transparency International. We've seen AFRICOG, the Mars Group, anybody who stands up for anti-corruption is often attacked, and very often it looks as if the attack comes from the state itself.
Yeah.
How do we keep this conversation alive in that environment?
Yeah, well, it's, you are right, we have been victimized and vilified a lot. I remember just recently when the vetting process for the new cabinet secretaries was happening, we happened to submit a memoranda or an affidavit. In our affidavit, we raised issues on Chapter 6 generally, and we were telling Parliament, look, Chapter 6 is a very important component of the vetting process and in our laws. And when you are vetting these individuals, you need to also consider issues of Chapter 6. And we even cited some of the reports that Parliament has relied on, or other institutions, on Chapter 6 by getting to a determination that this individual is not competent enough to hold office. And we listed some of the issues on those nominees. And we say that because of so-and-so has these issues, they should not be fit to hold office. And I remember there was a lot of backlash. In fact, there was one nominee who said that the mandate of these institutions, we need to have a conversation about the mandate of these institutions, like Transparency International. They should be protecting us. And we've had a lot of backlash, especially from politicians and the executive on the work that we do. It's not been easy. A lot of institutions that we started the journey with have not been able to be with us here today.
Yeah.
Yes, I know Mars Group, like now, they really suffered. I know AFRICOG as well is struggling a bit. So it's not really easy for us.
Yeah.
And the environment is really different right now. The civil societies in the 80s and 90s were more vibrant, more focused on we were able to shape the narrative. But right now there's a lot of counter-narrative from political parties, politicians. There's also a donor agenda which is really shifting. So the operating environment is very different. So how can we be able to sustain ourselves? I think we need to go back where we found our original voice and our original power and motivation. We need to go back to the people. Yeah. Once we are able to mobilize the people to understand our cause and support us, not in every way possible, then we can be able to come back stronger. And I think that is why platforms as this will be very important, because they reach out to the voice that has been left out a bit, rarely engaged, and just come back, come and support our cause.
But I'm wondering, you say we need to go back to the people, and those very people that you're talking about don't stand with the defenders, the whistleblowers, the people who stand up for them.
Yeah.
All through the year, if you look at, the years, if you look at the history of corruption, I don't want to name names because I will forget some. And some of them are actually portrayed in the podcast, Greedypendence. But you find that people stand up thinking they're doing the right thing, and the cost to themselves is astronomical. Their families are attacked, they are attacked physically, they're attacked economically, and I think I would not be remiss to say most of them end up broke, poor, and disillusioned.
And even dead.
And even dead.
Yeah, we've had quite a number of whistleblowers who have lost their lives. But whistleblowing is one of the essential components of anti-corruption, because almost every scandal has come to light because of a whistleblower.
Yeah.
I think quite a few have come out through investigative reports, but most of them have been whistleblowing. The Goldenberg scandal, Munyakei was a whistleblower. The Anglo leasing scandal, John Githongo was a whistleblower. And the problem that we've had is that we've never had proper safety nets in this country to protect whistleblowers. We don't even have any legislation on whistleblowing in Kenya. As Transparency International, we've tried for, I think, close to 15 years just to have a whistleblower protection law in place. But as the time of the end of the last parliament, I think that was the farthest we have gotten in that process. We managed to have a bill get into first reading. So for 15 years, we actually we tried to get it approved through cabinet, adopted by cabinet, but it failed. Then we got a private member, and we are not there yet in terms of whistleblowing. But it's also a sad and discouraging story, because if you look at, for example, Munyakei, he used to work in the Central Bank. Yeah, after he whistleblew, he was fired from his job, and he ended up to quite struggling. I think, I don't know whether to say a miserable life, but it was quite a tough life after he was fired from his job. Githongo had to go on exile for quite a number of years. And quite recently, we have one of the whistleblowers we are working with in the Mara heist. You remember the Masai Mara University scandal, where we had the leadership involved in abuse of office, withdrawals of money without following due process. And when he whistleblew, he was eventually fired from his job. Yes. And right now we have an active case in court where we are also parties to that suit, trying to challenge his dismissal from that job. But even if you look at it, even though we are trying to challenge it, whoever was involved is back to the institution. So it's no longer a safe space for him.
Yes.
The government does not have any mechanisms to even protect him or provide for him. Yes. So without institutions like us and individuals who support him, he has no safety net. And that makes whistleblowing a very risky affair, especially for those who don't have any mechanism. So whistleblowing is one of those things where we need now to strengthen institutions.
Yes.
The people might not be, at least unless the people might only be instrumental in adding a voice or pushing for institutional legal reforms to have those safety nets.
Yes.
But we go back to our elected leaders. Why is the whistleblower protection bill not in office, not in place, more than 10 years after it was proposed? Maybe there's something that is uncomfortable there, that the leaders don't want it in place. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it feels like we're going in a circle. You keep going back to the people who are the cause of your problem, and to fix the problem, and then they don't fix the problem, and then we go back to them, and So I mean, it feels very much like we're caught in that state capture feels very real. Yeah. It feels like there is actually no way out. I actually wanted just to ask how institutions like yours survive in that environment when others fell by the wayside.
Well, I think a combination of strategies. One, I think we are one of the things that really supports us is that we are a global organization. So we are a global movement, and anytime we get hit maybe by this pressure from the current government, at least we can seek refuge in the international movement. So I think that is one of the reasons why we have been able to survive for long. And then secondly, I think we've been able to find a balance between the old style of activism and civil society signature style to the modern one. You know, initially civil society organizations were very combative, never engaged government, viewed government as the enemy. But for us, we've been able to identify allies within government and work very closely with them. So I'll just give you an example, like some of the legislations that we've been able to support like election campaign financing, the Leadership and Integrity Act, the Public Officer Ethics Act. The moment you start thinking about legislative reforms, then you have to work with those people that traditionally you are uncomfortable working with. You have to sit with Parliament, you have to sit with those relevant committees, you sometimes have to sit with even the veto powers. You have sometimes to have meetings with even maybe, for example, the chief whip, just to get the numbers that you need to push for a certain legislative agenda into place. We've been able to work very closely with caucuses in Parliament. There's a caucus called African Parliamentarian Network Against Corruption. And we work with them, we sell them our agenda, and we tell them we will support your agenda, but please also support this. So I think it's one of the things, it's all about strategic partnerships, sometimes with individuals or groups that you traditionally were not comfortable with. Also donor funding, you know, we are a donor reliant, the civil society is heavily on donor reliant, but we've tried also to diversify our sources of income. Though it's a bit difficult, but we've been able to make a few progresses in terms of diversifying our sources of income, changing our resource mobilization strategy. So you really need to think out of the box if you have to survive this place.
Yeah. It's interesting coming out of what you're saying. There's a lot of reference to global support, donor funding, all these things that we rely on to keep the anti-corruption movement going. But at the same time, some of those global forces, there are also global forces that cooperate with the corruption forces. Yeah. The forces of corruption. How do we address those as Kenyans? Because sometimes you find that the corruption is hidden in so many channels that are not accessible to us. We don't even know about them. Yeah. You know, I mean, international banking structures, international conduits, you know, we hear about involvement in arms and trafficking through Kenya, all forms of trafficking, from human to arms to gold. Even the Goldenberg was about, it started with gold and minerals that we don't have. There's a big global network that supports and underwrites much of the corruption in our part of the world. How do we address that? Because without that support, some of the corruption at least would die.
It's a very tricky balance. The maths might not math, because if you
the maths might not math.
Yeah, actually, these donor organizations and foreign governments which support anti-corruption and good governance efforts in Kenya and in so many other countries also support government. Actually, it is reported that we receive very little of foreign funding. So you will go to government and there is a foreign government supporting, in terms of foreign aid, you would find even up to 80 or even 90% of foreign aid going to government,
Yes.
and then this 10% going to programs like ours.
Yes.
And from my own experience, anytime we have that situation, we have to be very diplomatic when we're engaging government. So you would get conditional grants, which says when you are doing a march or a protest, you can't mention us, you can't brand us, because you are protecting against the same government
Yes.
that we are supporting. Yeah, so things have really changed. The good thing about the old civil society movement is that they were able to shape the agenda, and donors would come and find what you are doing and support you. But now things have changed, so we sort of have to find what the donor is doing and then craft our proposals to fit the agenda. So we are no longer in that position where we are really shaping the agenda, and donors are coming in to support what we are doing. The tables have already have changed. But I think one of the ways that can be addressed is if we are able to get committed, passionate individuals into the civil society movement, as opposed to professionals. Today, if you get the average civil society, the NGO staff, that is a professional, is an expert in programming, project management, or accounting, or
Yes.
M&D. So I think by making the NGO space very, I don't know how to say,
Professionalizing
yes,
it.
very professionalizing it very much, we have sort of sacrificed passion to it. So I think we also need to reflect as the civil society movement and any other movement that advocates, activists, any other movement that supports it, to really think about the people within them,
Yeah.
so that they get people who are passionate and committed on changing the world of the country, and not
Yes.
necessarily professionals. I think that is one of the
Yeah.
a good thing for me to start
I
from.
mean, yes. I mean, I remember when you speak about the old days of civil society, I remember the passion with which they went up against the World Bank and all these organizations and told them, how could you give irresponsible loans to a government you can see that is corrupt? And we got debt forgiveness, you know, because actually the whole world could see, you know, you can't give loans to a person who's stealing the money and claiming that they're doing, you know, they're doing good for somebody else. So, I mean, there are very many things which I think would not be possible in today's world. I really want to ask about, as we wind up, the whole conversation about documentation. There seems to be so little movement, and I think there are a lot of fears that many of these cases will be forgotten. Greedypendence is an effort actually just to document. And what is your take on the state of documentation? What do you do as transparency to make sure that cases don't go away? Because this year there will be 10, next year there are another 10.
Yeah, and Kenyans have a way of
Forgetting.
So documentation, of course, is very important. Any advocacy effort which is not informed by evidence will not last long. So as transparency, we, and I think I also need to mention that there is a lot of evidence by the civil society. We just need to figure a way of making it more accessible and palatable to citizens. So we actually are a repository, a huge repository of information. If you come to our office, you'll find so many reports, some gathering dust, others not. If you go to our partner organizations, you'll find the same thing. So we collect a lot of data. We have a lot of knowledge products in our office, some which are online, can be accessed remotely. So we have all that. But moving forward, I think the entire movement needs to think of how do you package this information. A few years ago, if you gave a young person maybe a report, it's something they would read. Maybe now we need to think of even TikTok, some of these platforms which are not traditionally considered by us. How do we get this information in a format where it will be easily consumed? Because documenting is not enough, but is it reaching the intended persons? And then also some of the new ways in which this evidence, these documents are getting into the right people. Like when we engage the judiciary, a lot of us only engage the judiciary when we have a case in court. But there are some knowledge products that we can share with them in a setup that is not adversarial. What if we are able to get some of these products incorporated into the curriculum, maybe for training of lawyers, training of police officers, training of judges? I think that is one of the ways we can make it more impactful, the evidence that we have. So it's not just about getting evidence, because that we have enough, but how do we get this evidence in a manner, in a form that is consumable and will have impact.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if there was one thing, if you were to advise us on one thing, how will we know when there's real movement towards addressing corruption? If there was one thing government could do or should do today that would send a signal to all Kenyans that life has changed, what would that be? From your perspective, I know everybody might have a perspective.
Yes, and I know you told me I keep taking it back to the people.
Yes.
Which I think it's justified. I don't think government is necessarily an ally, at least right now, for us to change things. Well, there's nothing there's no tangible evidence to show of it. Of course, we have a few institutions that are doing a lot, like the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. They're doing a lot in terms of asset recovery, public information. They're doing a lot. But
what I was asking, if government were to have a change of heart, how would we know? Well, what is one thing that we would see that would tell us things have changed?
I think we would see more the so-called big fish being prosecuted expeditiously for their crimes and being jailed. I think the more high-level successful convictions that occur, that will be one of the greatest achievements for us, and coming from government, because that entirely depends on government doing investigations the right way, prosecuting the right way, courts being objective and expeditious in the judicial process, and even the prison systems being very effective. I know recently I've been seeing on social media one of former MPs, John Waluke, legislator, and someone was saying that they went to the prison and they found him very comfortable.
Yes.
So, so once we have this, the entire criminal justice system working, I think that will be a great indicator of success.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think I would just leave it there for now. And thank you very much for joining us. And thank you all of you who are joining us online, thank you for joining us. And just a reminder, you can reach some of our research on the Africa Uncensored website. Africa Uncensored is a close friend and partner. And you can find their research on WikiLeaks, not WikiLeaks, WikiLeaks. And on Nation Africa, you can find the podcast Greedypendence. Thank you for joining us. Those of you who are with us physically, thank you very much for joining us, and we hope that it was informative for you.
Thank you.
whistleblowers look like? Do they get compensation from the money that is recovered from the scandal that they've uncovered? Do they have to go into like witness protection in the most dangerous cases? I'm just curious to know what does legislation look like?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
May I start with that? Yeah, so in terms of information, on our website, if you go to check our website, you click on reports, there are so many reports you'll find there. There are also links to other platforms, which are not reports per se, but they have a lot of information. One of the platforms we have one called the RADA database, which documents and keeps a tab on corruption cases at the magistrates court level and even at the high court. We realize that maybe for those who do research or are lawyers, it's very easy to get information on cases that are completed at the high court, but at the magistrate courts, you can't get it. And then we also realize that you also, even in the media, you get a lot of information when someone is charged in court, but after that, you will not get information. So we developed a RADA database which keeps tabs on all this information. So if you go, you will find that this person was charged maybe in 2020. The case will come up for hearing on this day. So you'll get like a chronology of events on when the case, on the case. And then we also have a platform on that documented use of public resources during campaigns. It's still there. So there's a lot of information. Once you go to our website and you just scroll through it, you get all that information. Then secondly, on the whistleblower protection legislation that we are proposing, well, it has a raft of recommendations. The entire objective of the legislation is to promote and protect whistleblowers. So by promoting, it proposes government to, or government institutions or departments, even at departmental level, to it makes it it proposes that it should be mandatory for all these institutions to have guidelines, whistleblower guidelines within the organization. So for example, who is a whistleblower? Where can he report? When can he report? Well, which officer within the department is in charge of receiving reports, whistleblowing reports? What do they do about it? So the bill proposed every government institution to have in place whistleblower protection, whistleblower policies, because it's beyond protection, it's also promoting. And then there's also the aspect of protecting whistleblowers. Which institution should they go? In Kenya, we have a Witness Protection Act. But you see, you are only a witness when the matter is in court. That's when you become now a witness. Before that, you are not a witness, so there is no protection mechanism for you. So it proposed the Commission on Administrative Justice to be the custodian of, to be in charge of witness protection in the country. There was also a proposal on proceeds. There's a lot of debate on it. At some point, we proposed that the whistleblower receive 5% of the proceeds. But then there was a lot of debate around it. People were saying, what if it's, like Goldenberg was in billions. So what if or Eurobond was almost 100 billion. So what if there's a whistleblower who whistleblows and we recover 100 billion? That's a lot of money to give them 1%. So there was a lot of conversation around it, but I think we were in agreement that we needed to, first of all, protect whistleblowers financially so that you don't lose your job. There should be safety mechanisms to make sure that you will never be jobless by virtue of your whistleblowing or receive a token. And then also legally, so that you are not victimized. So you can whistleblow, and then your employer takes you to court for maybe releasing confidential documentation. And then So there's a whole aspect of promoting and protecting. I think I can make it accessible.
Yeah.
We had, we have two bills. When the cabinet failed to take our bill, we had someone from the African Parliamentarian Network Against Corruption who took the bill and tabled it as theirs. But there's also another MP who also took the bill or the idea, did another bill very similar to ours, and then submitted it to Parliament. But what we've been doing over years is to try to get the two of them to work together to do a draft bill and push it as one bill. So I think I have a copy, but
Okay.
can do an email, maybe share with you the bills.
Other questions? Yeah, let's take those.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Lazarus, and thank you to Baraza Media for organizing this. I think I have so much to share. I don't know where even to start. One is if you look at the environment, there's a big concern because this is a very important discussion, but the turnout is very low. And I'm guessing it's because we are not bothered anymore. Right now, it's all about everyone for him or herself. Me, as long as I have my fuel, I'll drive to work or I'll drive to the supermarket. As long as I have a security guard or I have my firearm, my house is safe. So I think the first problem is we are not bothered. As long as I'm sorted, other people, you can sort yourselves. And then another thing is, there's also this issue of entitlement. I know this person, I know that person, and if you don't know that person, you are doomed. We have become a nation whereby, because of my last name, because I know who this and that in government or in the police sector or in the private organization, I'm good to go. Like today, I think on social media, I saw Catherine Kasavuli, I think she had an issue, an appeal. But how many people every day are seeking that blood, but no one is airing the appeal? So it's also about this, your status in the environment. I also have an issue with Transparency International. There's a time I've invited you for an event, and I feel most of these organizations, you only attend events, I feel, depending on how prestigious it is or who invited you. But when it comes to other maybe events or something like that, no one shows up. And as big as organizations like Transparency International, they're nowhere to be seen. Another thing is the civil society, all these people that are fighting for corruption, fighting for justice, where are they? They're nowhere to be seen. On the ground, people have given up. People are in fear. Who will we run to? And I don't want to talk too much because I need to allow others to talk, but I also feel, and there's this comment that it's hard everywhere. Most of these organizations like UN, I won't say Transparency International, but maybe they're just there. They're just there to manage the situation. But if they can solve the situation, maybe they won't even be there. But most of these organizations, they're just there to manage situations because they're receiving funds, they're comfortable, they'll shout a little bit, then they go back home. But are they really solving the situation? And I'll conclude by saying, you're saying that the big fish will be caught. If the big fish can be caught, that would be a good sign. The other day, I think I saw, is it the current MP, Waluke, who I hear he has been caught, but he's still dressing well, as in he's comfortable where he is. So it's sad what's happening. On the ground, people have given up. as in it's not a good situation, and we just talk, talking. And not that I'm for pro-violence, but sometimes if some lives can be lost so that we can be redeemed from all this, we are saying state capture, blah, 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 I think we'll be somewhere as a country. I'm in pain, I'm in bitterness, because where will our children go? Myself, where will I go? Kenya is my country, but there's no progress. And the same talk, the same scorecard, the same strategic plans every year, now and then, they're just being released. So those are my comments, and thank you for this opportunity.
Do I want to respond first?
Let's take the two.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Francis Sakwa. I work for Adopt Peace and Justice Defender. It's a global solidarity network. So generally on our side, we are social movements. We're not members of civil society. There's a difference with that, and you know that. I have two questions. First, in terms of the graph, personally I voted 3 times, Kibaki regime, Uhuru regime, and Ruto regime. So in terms of graph, do you have hope in terms of issues of integrity and corruption? Are we doing good or are we doing bad for the 3 regimes? I need to get that before we develop the next action plan. Number 2, I think you've done your presentation there, and think you have not given us hope, but it seems a hopeless society and a hopeless nation. We cannot do anything. Generally, I believe that our argument is, if you can't get justice via voting, I think the court must protect us. And most of there's this animal called Chapter 6. It's always being talked about Chapter 6. So how does it exist? Does it exist, and how can it be used to protect us? Because if it doesn't exist, tell us, because there's this issue of Chapter 6, but it's not protecting us. Because how do you allow, for example, I come from Waluke's area, how do you allow people to elect a convict? So I need to understand, what do we do with this Chapter 6? Do we throw it away? What is the loophole? Because the court are not protecting us, the constitution is not protecting us. So what will happen? Because prior statement is hopeless. We have to go to the court, it's not working, the constitution is not working. What is the way forward? Thank you.
Okay. I hope, I apologize if I took away any little hope that you had, but I think the intention was to make you angry, at least make you angry. I was giving you facts. I was giving you a very true picture, no matter how grim the situation is. I didn't want to sugarcoat. So if you took it that the message, the intention was not for you to lose hope, but to gain hope and to do something, to get angry. You remember when the Supreme Court was being heard, there was a lawyer who said, I invite you to exercise your anger. So I invite you to be angry and not hopeless, that something can be done, especially from you. It's a good thing you've mentioned that you're not civil society, but you're social movements. And I think social movements are an embodiment of what civil society was before. You are the true spirit of what civil society stood for and how they began. And I think if you're able to learn from the lessons that civil society has learned and build up on them, focus on your strength, I think you're the next frontier for change. So I think there is a lot that you can do. In terms of Chapter 6, well, you know the stories that sell a lot are those that are hopeless. Let me go back there. So anytime there's someone who is out of the hook of Chapter 6, that's a story that sells. But anyone who's been kicked out of office on Chapter 6, it's not something very compelling, but we actually have a lot of success. Can you just imagine if we didn't have it? We have Sonko, for instance, who was kicked out of office on the basis of Chapter 6. It is Chapter 6 which says that if you've been removed from office for violating it, you cannot occupy any other public office. when the Supreme Court finally made a judgment on his impeachment and said, you've been impeached, that is being removed from office, you can't occupy any other public office, that was a success. Waititu has had to suffer from the same fate. So these are individuals that we don't expect to ever hold public office by virtue of Chapter 6. We had our first Deputy Chief Justice under the new Constitution, Nancy Baraza, who was removed from office for pinching a nose. That is a Chapter 6 issue. The report actually said that that behavior is not befitting a public officer. It was a Chapter 6 success. We have governors who've been told not to access office when they are being investigated. That is Chapter 6, because they might tamper with witnesses. It's basically the court raising questions on your credibility, on your character with Chapter 6. So there's a lot of success that we've had, but we might need another forum to engage it further. My brother raised issues on apathy. I think I agree with you. A lot of, especially young people, are no longer interested in issues of corruption. I think it's become a narrative that seems to have no end. And you also say that maybe we are here to manage the situation, but I think that we are doing the best we can. Of course, there's some success that has been made, but for us, we are like the hummingbird story of Wangari Maathai. That whether it is we are trying to put out a big a forest fire by a drop of water, it is the best that we are doing. And if all of us can do the best that we can, then I think we can do a lot. Interest, yes, there's very little interest in terms of these issues. I think one of the reasons why is because we've made corruption a very elitist thing. That if someone implicates you of corruption, that means you've made it. Maybe we just need to call it theft. Because actually it's theft. Yeah. If we say a politician has been charged for theft, it's more striking than corruption charges. So I think we need to go back. There's something you said which I seem to have forgotten. The graph?
Between regimes.
The trend.
Yeah, the trend, whether it has reduced.
Does it?
Yeah.
Statistics on that.
Yes, so a lot of analysts say we are getting more corrupt. Others say the opposite. But I think for us, to be honest, I think we have stagnated somewhere where we are making gains, but there are also a lot of cutbacks to the gains that we are making. So there's a lot of corruption happening now, but there are also a lot of gains. If you just go through the ESCC reports on asset recovery, and the assets that are being recovered now, and compared it to years ago, then we are making a lot of progress on that front. But if you look at now the monies that are being lost, then we seem not to be making progress. So I think we've sort of...
Do you have a figure on the recovery? Do you have any ballpark figure?
I think the last ESCC report, it was in the billions, either 10 or thereabouts. I can't pick the exact figure, but there's a lot. I think if there's one area that we've made a lot of progress in anti-corruption is asset recovery, because there's facts and figures to prove it. Just go through the ESCC reports, the asset recovery agency reports, the Financial Reporting Center reports. I think there's a lot that we've done on those fronts. Yeah.
Do we have any more questions, or are we ready to wind up?
Maybe let me ask them a question. Oh, finally, a lady. I wanted to
Yeah,
say.
I'm a bit shy, but I will try. Hi, thank you very much for this presentation. It was really clear. My name is Ramata. I'm French Senegalese, and I'm here as a PhD candidate, and I'm working on the Congolese diaspora here in Nairobi and looking at their relationship with the state, but also with the Kenyan society. So the issue of corruption is really interesting. And I would like to know if you can give us some insights on the link between corruption and neoliberalism. And because I'm trying to understand, the specificity of Kenya, because corruption is everywhere. It's really global. You find it in France, in Senegal, everywhere. But what is the specificity of Nairobi, of Kenya? I don't know if I'm clear enough.
Well,
Sorry.
I think, unless you're trying to say what is unique about corruption in Kenya.
Yes, but linked to the relationship with corruption and neoliberalism.
In the capitalism. That's a hard one. Now that's like an interview question. I should. Yeah. I should get a job after this.
You might.
Well, it's a tricky one. I'm not sure I really got it, but I think if you want to link it with capitalism, maybe maybe it could be an issue of scarcity of resources. And there was just a time we were having a conversation whether corruption is a foreign element in maybe the African setup. And I don't mean foreign in terms of being brought by foreigners, but is it something that existed before?
Yes.
Have we inherently always favored corruption as a community? Because if you really try to look back into our history, haven't we always rewarded people who have more resources, who are wealthy? Isn't the idea of getting someone with good ideals into a leadership position as foreign as as voting itself? So maybe with the scarcity of resources and the idea of capitalism and greed and just accumulation of wealth, it could be one of the things that fuel corruption.
I think there are alternative views on that, and there are certain views that say that Kenya never disengaged from colonialism. Really, we just changed the players, and the original, the colonial ethos was extraction. And we just literally replaced the black with the white and continued with the extraction. And unless there is some real social engineering around our economy and to center it in the people again, it will never automatically solve itself. And these are people, I could give you contacts for people who have done this study. They look at the failure of, sequential strategies, national strategies. They never fail, we never achieve. The most recent one they've done is Vision 2030. We're supposed to be a newly industrialized nation by 2030, and they say on the basis of the structure of our economy, it's impossible. It's impossible. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that speaks to what it speaks to what you're looking at. Mm-hmm. I think I will round it off there. I don't see any hands, but there's a hand.
So it's just, my name is Marty. I work at Odipodev. It's just a comment based on everything that everyone has been saying. I think you were asking about a graph. So if you go to John Alanamu's Twitter page, there's his pinned tweet. There's a project we did with Africa Uncensored, which looks at corruption based on each regime, from the Moi regime, the Kibaki regime, the Uhuru regime. It specifies amounts of corruption per regime, as well as some of the ministries that have been really involved in corruption. So I think that's the best way to sum it up. You just go to his pinned tweet, and when you look at the thread, there's a website, wikileaks.africancensored.online. You can check that out. It gives all the information that you're looking for. So yeah, just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate you being here. Again, apologies for the late start, but we hope that it was worth your time and that you gained something from this evening. Please do share the video when it's up.
I wanted to